Hello, and thank you for joining me here on Sew Stitch Hex. Today, even though this is recorded after the video you will see next, I am going to be recording about sacred spaces. This is going to be the preface, because I realized that the video that I recorded was more about when your sacred space is infringed upon. It is when your sacred space is taken from you, and I took better notes to talk more about it, but the article, Sacred Spaces, by Marcia Elade, talks about what makes a space sacred. And a lot of what they describe is how some of the places are very elaborate and beautiful, and it can be a physical place like the mountains that's just natural, like the mountains in China that they described. Or it can be a place that is natural because it was a gift from the gods and not just because of how beautiful it is. It can be like Israel was a gift from God. But it could also be a place that has been built specifically for worship. Now, what I've learned from this is that to make a place sacred, it needs to evoke a religious experience. So for me, I feel that could involve any number of places. Some questions that I came up with were, how do you define sacred space? Like, how do you? I define it as that religious experience. Have you ever had to adapt to a new religious experience or to a new sacred space? Was your sacred space ever taken from you? Do you see more significance in one place that you see as sacred than you should? Is it a place that you wouldn't normally think of as sacred that could be inconvenient for others? Have you lost it? Or have you lost one before? If you have lost it, does it give you that feeling like you need to have, like you're not in control? I've lost the sacred space, and to me it feels like even though I'm standing up, that I should have a seatbelt on, that I should always be buckled in. Like, I can't, everything moves too fast, and it's like, whoa, it's not good. But, you know, did you see that your sacred space being taken from you like a test? Like, for me, I've seemed to think of it as a trial by fire. Was it a breakdown of your contrived views, or was it was it a deserving assault to your ego? It's important questions to think about when we think about sacred spaces, because one of the things they brought up in the article is that God isn't here on earth, God is above it. That was one of the arguments for why they didn't have an elaborate space, because for them, what was important was the Word. The Word was the absolute epitome of the space, and therefore they didn't need the ornamentation, because the focus should be on the Word of God and the importance. It shouldn't be on the aesthetic of the environment. The idea is that God isn't in the world, but He's above it. For me, I am polymorphic monotheist, meaning that I see one God who has many forms. For me, He is a she and a person who is of various ethnicities, and because to me they are an incorporeal being. They are simultaneously everywhere and nowhere at the same time. That's what simultaneous means. They are all and nothing. They embody everything and they touch nothing. They do it all. And for me, it's because they are not one thing, because they are everything, and therefore they are nothing. Seems repetitive, but also... So, for me, this is really valuable because it talks into what I think is a sacred space, and it ties into how I think of prayer. For me, it's like they know everything, and... Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to yawn. It's like a million times, and I'll just keep yawning, so... It's like they know everything, but to me, I feel like the deity would choose not to invade in your personal thoughts unless you are, like, unless you open your mind, and we consciously open the thoughts to the divine. They would not choose to intrude or break the sanctity of our inner thoughts, because to them, they are the divine, they are separate from us, and our goal, I would assume, would be to become closer or to become one with the divine. especially if we are just a fragment of the divine in its early forms. The idea is that, for me, opening my mind specifically to the divine is my prayer. It is how I would pray. I may not speak out loud, although I try to. But it would be, as I've learned, prayer is talking to God as if you were talking to a friend. And so you would just blatantly say what you were going to say, and I don't try to glamorize it. I just say, hey, this is how today was. Like, you were there, but let me tell you anyway, because I want to verbally say it so that they understand that this is important to me. Just like if I get a new item to represent a deity or an aspect of the deity that I enjoy, I will be like, hey, I know you saw me get this, but this is what I got for you. I'm so happy that I found this for you. I hope you like it. I'm glad we get to spend this time together. And that comes into approaching a new spirit or deity, or for me, just a different aspect. For me, I would do research on the different deities and all the different practices and religions, because to me, doing that research is important because I see God as one. So whether I speak to goddess, whether I speak to God, whether I speak to a non-gendered being or gender fluid being, I'm not sure what I think it is, but somewhere in there, I would want to know who I'm speaking to. And for me, it's more like a dissociative identity thing, kind of like a multiple personalities disorder. And the incense, the colors, the imagery that we invoke, that is what brings out the aspect of the deity that we're after. That is the proper trigger that you need to speak to a specific deity. And that's where I think getting confused between what deity you're actually speaking to comes into play, because we are not properly recognizing the triggers or misunderstanding the signs that spirit has given us. This comes into also the idea of God pretending to be a different God, because you're not actually talking to one. And I guess in a sacred space, for me, I would be able to speak to whatever God I'm trying to speak to, but I do try to invoke in a sacred space what specific deity I want to speak to. And in my sacred space, I do prefer to give libations. I prefer to give drink and food, because as I've grown with my altar, which I didn't create formally until college, I've gotten a lot of stuff on it, because I didn't have a formal altar. I just had stuff that I collected. But once I made a formal altar, it's gotten cluttered, because I have so many different aspects that I like to approach. So I like having the libations, one, because it's something I can get rid of, but also because it's a food, and it feels like a more permanent sacrifice, not just something that I bought one time and put there. So there's also this aspect of, keeping my altar less messy, and sharing the food, because you are breaking bread. This is a very significant thing in many cultures, and I find that it's really important to help sanctify a space, as if I mentally either pray thanks for my food, or more specifically, just leave a little for the gods. Give them some of my own food, because this is my own nutrition. And this can also play into sanctity of, like, my inner temple, which I will go over later. But the idea of the inner temple being a place of sanctuary, being a place of sacredness. So, more questions to leave you with. Do we deserve our sacred spaces? Or do we need to continuously prove our worth and prove our faith to keep them? Are we truly, are they truly sacred, or are we just, making it up? Are they pure? Do they need to be? And is it really a sacred space just because we have a religious experience? Further extension of, is it sacred because we told it that it was, or is it sacred because we truly have a religious experience, and does that matter? And what non-traditional sacred spaces do you hold? Alright, thank you for joining me here on Sew Stitch Hex, and I hope to see you next time.